One thing that helps in discovering your own path is learning from role models in engineering. Each person has a different career path, and it is always interesting to learn about other people's choices and career decisions. We hope that events like this will make you feel comfortable in approaching deans and faculty and our alums so they can serve as guides and role models for you. And in full disclosure, I found events like this to be particularly helpful when I was an engineering student myself. That's why I'm particularly excited to introduce today's keynote speaker. And now I'd like to introduce her. Our keynote speaker today is Valerie King-Bailey. Valerie King-Bailey is founder and CEO of Onshore Technology Group, an engineering, marketing, and IT firm in Chicago that offers independent validation and verification. Ms. King-Bailey was the first Black woman to graduate from the UW-Madison Civil Engineering Department. And then she went on to earn an MBA from the Keller Graduate School of Management. She's won numerous awards, including the UW-Madison 2008 College of Engineering Distinguished Alumni Award. When at UW, Ms. King-Bailey was a member of the Society of Women Engineers and the president of the UW Diversity Engineering Association. More recently, she served a 3-year term on the board of the UW Alumni Association. Please join me in welcoming Valerie King-Bailey.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here today. I don't know who's more excited, you or me. I have a kind of an interesting story to tell you about my journey through STEM, my journey through the University of Wisconsin, and my journey since I left. I titled my talk to you today, Dare to be Different. When I was young and I was sitting in your seat, there were many stereotypes about folks like me. And I dared to be different. I dared to go into a discipline that not many people like me went into. But I want to share with you today why it's so important that you, as a woman engineer, be sitting in this room today and doing what you're doing at the University of Wisconsin. So I'm going to take you on a little journey. I want to talk to you about, first of all, why are we still talking about diversity in engineering? When I graduated from UW years ago in '82, when I graduated, we were talking about this topic then. We were talking about how come there are not a lot of women in engineering? What's going on with that? I'm going to share a couple of things with you to try to shed a little bit of light on that and talk to you about what we need to do about that going forward, and we as the collective engineering community. Then I want to talk about some of the challenges today that engineers face. Engineers are problem solvers. Every single one of you in this room is a problem solver. So why is it important that women be a part of that equation? We're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to take you on a 15-minute journey into my career and what I've done since I've left the University of Wisconsin. Some of this is going to be hilarious, so hold on to your boots. And then I'll talk about entering into a man's world and going into my career. And I'd like to share with you some lessons learned. And boy, did I learn some lessons. Some were hard lessons. Some were good lessons, and some lessons just needed to be learned. So let's go. Why are we still talking about this topic? I was listening to this guy, and he was speaking at the Anita Borg Institute. This was recent. And a question was asked of him in the audience: how should a woman ask for a raise when you're on a job? Oh, this is a good question, and a lot of women ask the question because sometimes as women, we tend to shy away from direct confrontation. We tend to shy away from asking and being direct about something. Guys don't have a problem with this, but some women do. And here's what he said, and this was like hilarious. You have to read this, and I'm going to read it exactly what he said. He said, it's really not about asking for the raise, but knowing and having faith that the system will give you the right raises as you go along. And then he said, and this was rich, he said, that might be the kind of initial superpowers that, quite frankly, women who don't ask for a raise have. So in other words, if you're not asking for a raise, you're superwoman. And then he said, it's good karma. It will come back to you. Okay, spoiler alert. Women, ask for the raise. It's not karma. But this is why we're still talking about this topic. This is a CEO of a major company. This is a very intelligent man. And I've heard him speak in person. He's a super intelligent guy. And by the way, full disclosure, Onshore Technology Group has been a Microsoft partner for 13 years. I do a lot of business with this guy. I was absolutely stunned, and I was watching this as it was happening live. I couldn't believe that he said that. But when you think about this, this is why this topic still comes up. Because there are attitudes like this that, you know, it's going to be karma that gets you your next raise. For real? And I'm like, no way. He later apologized for this, bless his heart. And he said, you know what, probably shouldn't have said that. But this is one of the reasons why we're talking about this. And let me share this with you. When we talk about diversity in engineering and we talk about women in engineering, it's not really about the numbers. It's not that guys are better than women or women are better than guys. This is not about numbers. This is not about quotas. It's about diversity of thought. And so what Laura was talking about when she was sharing with you some of the statistics, that's really what this is about. When you get diverse thought into a room, you do get a better solution. And I'm going to share some of that with you. Take a look at this car. Now, some women think, you know, oh man, you know, cars, that's a whole guy thing. No, this car was designed by a woman. And if you look at the car, you look at the everything, here's what she said. It's a lady by the name Wendy Lee. Go on CNN and Google this. This is a great article because they talk about 10 women in the automotive design area. And automotive design, one of the reasons I picked this example to share with you today, because it's not a typical woman thing. Automotive is usually somewhat of a guy thing, if you will. But this car was actually designed by a woman. But listen to what she said. She said, to me, working on the overall interior of the car seems a lot more interesting than working on the car's exterior. And she said, in looking at the effects of color on shape and how it changes based on the light and the time of day. Do you know any guys who would say that? They would be talking about how cool the red car is and not, you know, the effects of this. Women and men think differently. If any of you are married in here, you know what I'm talking about. Women and men do not think the same way. And, you know, when you think about this, think about what she was talking about, how the interior of the design and the exterior of design in her mind are different. This is the interior that she designed. And this is, you know, what she was getting at is making the surfaces look appealing. When I saw this car, I was like, oh yeah, that's a woman car. That's something, I would drive this car. But when you think about this, this is the diversity of thought. Women have a lot of different opinions about stuff. And check this one out. This is another quote, and I love this quote when I saw it. This lady, Diane Allen, she works for Toyota. And she said, if you don't have the I'm going to fight my way through kind of personality, you won't make it. I fought for 10 years just to get a little respect. I can relate to that because as a female engineer in corporate America, you have to fight for what you want. All of us, no matter what we do, we need that kind of fight within us because you'll have to get your point across. If you've ever sat in a room like I have with 10 male engineers and you're the only one in the room, you have to find a way to get a word in edgewise. And the guys will keep talking. I have learned how to intercept that conversation. And you don't intercept it with garbage. You obviously intercept it if you have a point. If you have no point, that's another story. But she said she fought. And she said you have to have that kind of fighting spirit. One of the things I want to leave with you today is if you're going to make it in this discipline, and you can make it in this discipline, you have to have that kind of fight and that kind of spirit as you're going into this. Take these three women. I saw this movie, and I didn't see this movie as an African American. I saw this movie as an engineer. When I was watching this movie, there was a part of my career that leaped out on the page to me, and I was thinking, or leaped out from the screen, and I thought, oh my God, this was the same thing. It's the scene where the engineers are trying to figure out how to use the IBM computer. And I don't know if you remember this scene, for those of you who saw Hidden Figures, but there was a scene when they were trying to figure out how to use the computer. And Dorothy was actually kind of watching them. And then what she did is after they left, she went behind and she went in the room and she did a very woman thing. She picked up the manual. She started reading the manual. And the next thing you know how this comes out. She figured out how to use the computer. And the reason that reminded me of something that happened in my career is what she did is she volunteered to do something no one asked her to do. Listen to me, ladies. This is something that a lot of women in engineering get out of engineering because of. Here is a complaint that I've heard from female engineers all over the world. Why didn't you stay in engineering? Well, they didn't give me a good assignment. They gave me all the crap stuff. Well, guess what, ladies? When I got into engineering, they gave me all the crap stuff too. When you start out in engineering, sometimes it works like that. They give you all of the assignments. Guess what my assignment was day one when I started in engineering? I was in charge of the safety report for the Department of Engineering. Well, guess what? I worked in an office. There was no safety hazard there. So guess how many safety issues I got to report every week? 0. So every week, here was my job. This was my whole thing that they're paying me all this money for. You have to write a safety report and put down there were no safety issues in the Department of Engineering. I was praying that somebody had a paper cut. But nobody had a paper cut. When she volunteered, it reminded me of something that I did in my first job when I was at U.S. Steel. I did the same thing. So I would go in these meetings and I got really sick of writing the 0 on the safety report. And every day we would go in, the chief engineer would hand out assignments to all the engineers. I was called a management associate, so that's kind of a half engineer. And they would hand out all the assignments. So one day, the chief engineer gives my boss an assignment. He said, hey, Jim, you need to take this. We need to replace the boilers because the heating system in the plant is causing us to lose about $2 million a day in energy loss because we had steam leaks all over the plant. I work for U.S. Steel. So my boss was like, oh man. So we walk out of there and I said, Jim, that sounds like a really cool project. Why don't you want to do that? And he was like, do you know how many calculations I'm going to have to do? There's 64 buildings in this plant. I'm going to have to go through each one of them, find out the coefficient of energy and all the walls and all of this stuff. And I'm going to have to redesign all of the heating systems in the building. And I'm like, this is great. And I said, can I do it? And he looks at me and he said, can you do it? And then he thought for a minute and he goes, yeah, why not? You need to earn your keep. And he threw it over to me and he says, you do it. And he says, but I'm warning you, this is going to take you a long time, and you're going to be up nights and blah, blah, blah. And he was like throwing all of this stuff at me, and I was like, great, because I wanted to do something other than the safety report. I wanted to volunteer. I volunteered to do this. And then I asked him, I said, can I use the computer? We had a mainframe computer at U.S. Steel that none of the engineers knew how to do. Because I had this fantastic degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I knew how to use the computer. So I wanted to use my Fortran experience to figure out how we could program this. Because I'm thinking that's brain dead to sit there and, do all of this by hand. And I've got a huge mainframe sitting right behind me. Let me program it. Long story short, I programmed the system. I programmed the computer to calculate the energy loss in each one of the buildings. I programmed it also to tell me what type of alternate heating system should be in the building. I generated this big report and I took it back to Jim. And I said, Jim, is this right? And Jim looks at me and he goes, how in the world did you do this? And I said, well, I programmed the report and everything. He took it to the chief engineer. I actually won an award for saving U.S. Steel $2 million a day in energy loss with this heat loss program, and they put me in charge of doing everything. So when I saw Hidden Figures and I saw her volunteer, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I did. And if you think about that movie and what they were doing, each of these women were pioneering in their own right. You had one that was struggling just to be an engineer. She was fighting to get into engineering school. You have the other one that was fighting to, get a man into space. And John Glenn is one of my personal heroes. I never missed the launch when I was a little girl. I actually wanted to be an astronaut. And I love the whole space story and everything. And I got a chance to work with NASA, which I'll tell you in just a second. But this movie was fantastic for so many different reasons. But here was the thing that I loved about it. These were women doing very, very technical things. I love this because they dared to be different. They were different in what they did. They weren't the stereotypical women. They weren't necessarily housewives. Nothing wrong with housewives. Been there, done that. But they were different. They were different in the way they thought. They were different in their approach. And, when you saw her doing the calculations on the board and everything, this was the classic thing that I was talking about, the difference in the way the guys looked at the problem and the way she looked at the problem. Next time people talk to you about diversity in engineering, it's about diversity of thought. It's not about quotas. It's not about get a certain number of people that look like this or act like this or whatever. No, it's about diversity of thought. Diversity does strengthen us. It strengthens our profession. It strengthens who we are as a people. But I love this movie, Hidden Figures. Now, for the engineers in the room that are about to graduate, let me give you some good news and some bad news. The good news is you're going to graduate, yay! The bad news is that you're encountering a huge number of problems. Engineers, remember, are problem solvers. You have the issue of cybersecurity that is going to face you, and every single one of these issues are going to be solved by engineers of some sort. You've got the issue of nuclear terror that's facing this country. You've got clean water issues. You'd be amazed at how much of the population doesn't even have clean water. And now with 2 or 3 hurricanes in the Gulf, we're going to have more water issues in the United States than we know what to do with here very shortly. You look at the infrastructure problem. This is one that's near and dear to my heart as a civil engineer. The American Society of Civil Engineers, for about the last 13 years, I stopped counting, has given the United States of America a D- or a D+ in terms of our infrastructure. We have a massive infrastructure problem in this country. And then clean energy, being able to deliver clean energy. And I could go on and on, the clear and present danger of global warming and things of that sort. These are things that everyone in this room is going to have to solve. If you think about why I took a day away from my company to be here, because I believe it is so important for me to tell you that what you're doing is absolutely important. Ladies in the room, stick with it. We have serious issues to deal with. I believe that the shortage of engineers that we have in this country, male and female, is a national security threat to the country. I'm going to share with you how important it is, but how profitable it is and how much fun it is to do what all of you are going to be doing. But we have some enormous challenges facing us. And this is the group that's going to help to solve those challenges. Now, how did I get here? This is a really, really interesting story. When I was in high school, or a little bit before high school, I actually am one of 3 children. Believe it or not, I actually hated school. I did not like school at all when I was in 8th grade. I was graduated from 8th grade, and I asked my brother, I said, wow, I'm out of school now, I can go and get a job. And he goes, you idiot, you can't get a job, you have to go to high school. I was devastated when he told me I had to go to high school. I'm like, really? And I've got enough book learning, what do I need to learn? I hated school. And then something happened to me. My brother told me one day, he said, I was taking aptitude tests in 8th grade to determine what high school I go to. And so my brother told me one day, he says, you don't need to take any of these tests, and you've been in 8th grade and middle school, they give you a battery of tests before they determine whether you're going to go to school or not. Well, me being the kid that I was, I didn't want to take any of the tests. And my brother said, you know what, I have an idea. He said, just mark your paper, and you circle the little ovals and everything. My brother told me, he said, just mark the little ovals in pattern. So I never took the test. So I started marking the little circles in there, never took the test. So my teacher comes back in 8th grade, and she says, well, I got good news and some bad news. And she said, the good news is everybody passed except one person. And I'm looking around going, wow, who's the idiot? And then she says, Valerie, you need to go down to the principal's office. I sunk. I was like, oh my God, my mother is going to kill me. Now, my mother and father were maniacal about us getting an education. They were just like, right before my father passed away, the last thing he said was, make sure they go to school. So I knew I was in deep trouble. So I go down to the principal's office, and they tell me that, well, we got your aptitude scores, and you're reading on a 3rd grade reading level, and your math level is on 4th grade. And I was like, I can explain this. See, here's what I did, and I told them about marking the ovals and everything, and they just sat there looking at me like a frog in a hailstorm. And I just thought, this is not going over well. And she says, well, we're not going to keep you, and this is what they do in the Chicago public school system, one of the worst in the nation. They said, we're going to put you in a school with educationally, mentally handicapped kids. And I'm like, what? There's nothing wrong with me. So then they bring my mother up. My mother is smacking the crap out of me as we walk up to the school. And she said, here's what Valerie did. She tells her whole story about me marking my paper or whatever. So nobody believed it. Long story short, they ended up putting me in this school. So first day of school, my math class, they put on the board, true story, 2 + 2. We spent 20 minutes on that. And I'm like, oh my God, 4. Can we move on? And it was like, no. So I'm sitting in this class, and I'm like, I don't belong here. We have been telling everybody, I don't belong here, I don't belong here. Nobody believed me. Finally, I get to my English class, and she says, write a paper on what you did over the summer. Well, this is easy. I wrote her a paper and told her all about how I marked the test, and I got into the stupid school. And so I write it. And she comes back to me the next day, and she's passing out the papers, and she said, everybody in the class can be dismissed, but Valerie, I want you to stay. And I'm like, now what did I do? And so she tells me, she hands me my paper back, and it said A++. And she said, okay, so why are you here? Are you a discipline problem? Did you have a fight? Why are you here? You don't belong here. And I'm like, thank you. I've been trying to tell everybody I don't belong here. So she said, I'm going to tutor you personally myself, and I'm going to call your mother. So she tried to talk to the school officials. They wouldn't move me. So this teacher stopped, and this is why I love teachers. If there are any faculty in the room, hugs and kisses. Teachers are amazing, because this teacher stopped And she said, "You have potential." That was the first time in my life that anybody other than my parents had told me that I had potential. And that's how I got religion about education. It all of a sudden became important because I realized at that time, without an education, they were going to push me into this school, and then I was going to be stuck for the rest of my life this way. That's how I ended up. So as I got into the school, I was reading, at least what they said, on a 3rd grade reading level. I was #1 at the end of my first year in high school. I graduated as a rank of #4. I had straight A's all the way through high school. I never got a B. I had a 4.0 GPA when I graduated high school. And I won so many awards and I won some scholarships. And they were trying to see if they could get me into Big Ten schools because no one from my high school had ever gotten into a Big Ten school. So they started applying me to schools. So I get into Ohio State and I get into the University of Illinois. So I'm getting all these letters. I don't know where any of these places are. I had never been outside of Chicago. So all of a sudden she says, "Well, we're going to see if we can apply you to the creme de la creme. We're going to apply you to the University of Wisconsin." And I'm like, okay. So she sends a letter off and I fill out the application for University of Wisconsin. And I get this letter back from Purdue University. And it's about that thick. And it was like, "We're going to give you a scholarship and we're going to give you this and that and this and that." And Purdue came to my house. They talked to my mother. And then the University of Illinois, they sent another letter that thick. They gave me scholarships or whatever. And I get this letter in the mail from the University of Wisconsin. It's as thin as a rail, and it says University of Wisconsin. I thought it was a rejection letter, and I said, "Oh, this is this Wisconsin place. I bet this is going to be a rejection," because there was no thick package. And I open the letter, and it says, "Congratulations, you've been accepted to the University of Wisconsin. The SOAR program is on this date and this date. Congratulations, look forward to seeing you. Love always, University of Wisconsin." I'm like, what? So I take the letter in, and I show it to my advisor, and I said, "Hey, look what I got. I got another one of these letters in the mail from the University of Wisconsin." And she paused, and she said, "From where?" And I said, "University of Wisconsin, you know, the school that we applied to." And she says, wait, you got into, let me see the letter. She takes the letter from me, and she goes, "Oh my God," she runs out of the office. I'm like, where the hell is she going? And then next thing I hear a loudspeaker, "Boys and girls, congratulate Valerie King. She's just been accepted to the University of Wisconsin." I'm like, where the hell is Wisconsin? I had no idea at the time what she was talking about. And so I'm like, okay, and then the principal walks in the office. I'm still sitting there, I'm in shock, and I hear this whole thing. The principal walks in and she goes, "You gotta go to the University of Wisconsin." And I'm like, "But Purdue sent me a thing that thick. And what about the University of Illinois?" She says, no. You gotta go to the University of Wisconsin. No one from this school has ever gone to the University of Wisconsin. She's like, "Oh my God, congratulations, this is just big, this is just big." So she's calling people and everything, and I'm like, "Wisconsin?" You know, I had no idea. So on her advice, purely alone, I said, okay, I'm going to the University of Wisconsin. So then I got a scholarship from the Purdue Foundation, and at my graduation, and all of a sudden, you know, money was coming in. People were giving me scholarships and all of this stuff. And that's how I ended up at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I roll into here, you know, in the summer of 1976, and I ended up at Union South and the SOAR orientation program, and kind of the rest is history. So let me talk to you now about my journey into STEM. So I get here, I'm overwhelmed by the campus. This campus is fantastic. It was fantastic back in '76. It's off the hook now. But look at what happened to me after I left. So this is my career in 15 minutes. In 1981, now I graduated in 1982, but I had a class that I needed to finish in geology, which I did through the Wisconsin Extension. So I actually left campus in 1981. And in September of 1981, I started with U.S. Steel. And I was in the environmental engineering department. I worked on a lot of Superfund issues and that kind of thing. And then I was promoted to the design engineering group. And this is where I did that alternate heating system project. And I did a lot of other projects too. I worked on an electrodynamic Venturi scrubber. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's an environmental cleaning system. I did a lot of stuff at U.S. Steel. I had a lot of fun until they decided to close the plant. And I found myself, after 3 years at U.S. Steel, for the very first time, my first job out of college, I was out of a job for 2 months. U.S. Steel gets on the line, the CEO one day, and he goes, we've now purchased Marathon Oil, and with the purchase of Marathon Oil, we're shutting down all of the plants in the Midwest and in Philadelphia, except one. All of a sudden, we were all out of a job. And I thought, oh my goodness. So I was in graduate school at the time, and I talked to my professor, and I said, you know, I don't really want to work in heavy industry anymore. I'd like to do something else. And he said, call my buddies at Intergraph. Intergraph, at this time, was kind of the it company in the early 80s. It's a computer-aided design and drafting company. Probably the most fun that I've had sitting at a desk in my entire life. That company was so much fun. I learned so much there about advanced technology and engineering. I was actually a site engineer when I was there, and a transportation design engineer. So for those of you who've driven outside of Milwaukee on I-94, there's an airport spur that goes to the airport. I worked on that airport spur with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation through my work with Intergraph. I also worked on the restoration of the Statue of Liberty. I worked on the aerodynamics design for the Ford Taurus, the original reconstruction of the Challenger disaster on the Intergraph system. These were all things that I was involved in at Intergraph Corporation in 1984. But it was a funny thing that happened to me when I was there. So I spent quite a bit of time there. I was there for about 12 years. And when I was there, first 5 years, I had perfect performance reviews. I had 5 out of 5 on performance reviews. But it was interesting. I kept getting passed over for positions. So new position would open up, and I'd be going, hey, you know, that's a great position for me. Get passed over for the job. New position opens up again. Get passed over again and everything. This happened. So after about 5 years, I started thinking about it. So I had a professional mentor. His name was Bill. And I went to Bill and I said, Bill, I said, I'm doing a great job here and everybody seems to like me. Yeah, what's going on? And I said, well, why do I keep getting passed over for promotion? And Bill said, did you ask for a promotion? And I said, well, no, I kind of have the Microsoft guy thing. It's just going to come to me, right? You know, I'm doing a good job and they're going to recognize me, right? Bill told me this, and for all the ladies in the room, listen up. He said, here's what I want you to do. He said, tomorrow I want you to walk into your boss's office and I want you to tell your boss what you want. And he said, is there a position open that you want? And I said, yeah. Director of Architecture, Engineering, and Construction for the Midwest region. It was the director of AEC position that was open, and I wanted the job, and I felt like I was really qualified for the job. And I'm telling Bill all of these things. Well, Bill, I've done this, and this, and this, and this. And he goes, I know, Val. And he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk into his office, and I want you to tell him exactly what you just told me. And then he said, I want you to tell him, if you don't give me the job, then I'm going to leave. And I go, well, what if he takes me up on that? Then I don't have a job, and I don't want to leave. And so he says, Valerie, he said, they're not going to let you go. You're too valuable. Listen to what he told me. I didn't think I was valuable. I never thought of myself in those terms. I'm being a woman. I never thought about it that way. And he said, you're too valuable. They're not going to let you go. And I said, how do you know that? And he goes, Val, listen listen to what you just told me about all the things that you did or whatever. He said, go in there and tell him that. So I go home and I tell my husband, who's sitting right there, I said, Vince, he told me to go in there and tell the guy that I'm going to leave. And he told me to, just go ahead and ask him just straight out for the job. And Vincent said, yeah, and ask him for 10% increase. You're making it worse. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like freaked out about asking him this. So into his office I walk. And so I'm trying to, all the way to work, I'm trying to think of what am I going to say? Am I going to ask him for this and how am I going to do it? So I walk in the office and I said, hey Dave, and I said, you got a minute? But if you don't have a minute, it's okay. I can just go away and come back. And he goes, yeah, come on in, Val. And so I said, Dave, I've been doing a good job. Great job. And I was like, okay, this is going okay. And I said, this position is open for a director of AC. Yeah? And I said, I think I deserve the job. Then I started getting my second win. And I'm thinking, yeah, I deserve the job. And I said, Dave, I've been doing a good job. And I've done this, and this. And I said, if I don't get this job, I may have to consider severing my ties with the company. Oh my God. He jumps up, he closes the door, and he goes, I didn't know, wait. I didn't know you were upset. And then I'm thinking, I'm not upset. I'm just, I'm just saying. And then he goes, well, of course you're qualified for the job. And I said, well, why didn't you interview me? And he said, listen to this. I thought you were happy. And I said, you thought I was happy? And I was like, okay. And he said, no, I thought you were happy doing what you're doing. You're so great at it. Okay. And then he was like, yeah, I'll interview you for the job. Come on in. And he was like, obviously you're qualified. And he says, you're probably the most qualified person in here for the job. Listen to this. Even though he said I was probably the most qualified person for the job, he never interviewed me. I never asked. When I asked, I interviewed for the job, and I was director of AEC for 6 years until I left the company. You have to ask for the job. No, in addition to what Nutella is saying at Microsoft about the karma and it'll come to you and you got superpowers, no. He thought I was happy. And so he was just going to let me be happy doing what I was doing. If I had not asked for that position, I would have never got it. And that's the takeaway from that job. But I had a blast at this company. And then a funny thing happened to me one day. My boss, who was my boss at Intergraph, he had left the company a couple of months earlier. And he called me one night and he said, hey Val, there's this new company that's opening called Documentum. Now, for those of you who don't know, Documentum is a document management company. They were based in Pleasanton, California, and Documentum was actually sold to EMC for about $1 billion, and then they just got sold recently to OpenText. But at the time when I was at Documentum, they weren't even a publicly traded company. Their revenues were about $4 million or whatever. For a software company, that's not really a lot. So in 1995, Documentum was brand new. They didn't even have a product on the market that was a packaged out-of-the-box product. It was just a platform, if you will. So I started with Documentum, and the guy hired me there. And he told me, he said, I could pretty much double your salary from Intergraph Corporation. And I go, wow, So I interviewed for the job, it went well. I stayed there for approximately 4 months. I hired on as a customer engineer. And so I was busy doing my work, and I happened to be talking in a Denny's to somebody, and it was another Documentum employee. And I was talking to them about how Documentum could win in the life sciences space. And we were just having a conversation over our Denny's eggs and bacon. And a vice president was sitting behind me. I had no idea. So he overheard this conversation and he said, how'd you like to be the director of industry development for Documentum? well, I'd only been there for 4 months. And I'm like, just doubled my salary, so I'm sitting fat and sassy. And he says, yeah, I like what you said, and we need you to come over. So I developed a product called Dump Control Manager, which is still on the market. I wrote the market requirements for it. And it was all the stuff that I was talking about in Denny's, of all things. So I worked for Documentum. I ended up winning one of the awards that they had for the most successful product. And Dump Control Manager is still on the market today. This product still exists on the market today. The one that I developed at Intergraph was a product called Inroads. It's a transportation design product. And guess where I got Inroads from? My fancy degree at the University of Wisconsin, they made us write, in my transportation design course, they made us write a computer program for horizontal and vertical curves. Well, we were going into all of the departments of transportation across the country, and we were doing this stuff manually. I went ahead and I told them, I said, we can actually program this and actually, have three-dimensional graphics that would show a driver going down a road, and we could do road design in a more automated way. Well, they built this product called Inroads, and Inroads is still on the market today. So a lot of people ask me, how did you get from engineering into marketing? Because by the time I got through with Intergraph and Documentum, which were actually software companies, I learned a lot about marketing, and specifically technology marketing. So then I left Documentum, and I was speaking at a regulatory conference on behalf of Documentum, and a headhunter was in the audience for Abbott Laboratories and heard me speaking, and asked me if I would speak to one of the directors at Abbott. So I go to Abbott, and Abbott wanted to purchase the software application that I had developed, and they heard since I developed it, they wanted to hire me. So I go on board with Abbott Laboratories, and in addition to actually deploying this software, they put me in charge of all the validation for the hospital products division, which today is Hospira. So I didn't know it at the time, but the company was spinning off the hospital products division into Hospira. So they asked me to come on board and actually work with them to do that. So I worked with Abbott for a while, and then as I'm giving a presentation at another conference, one of the CEOs or the directors of QMOS, which is based in Ireland, they came calling, and they asked me if I would come on board to work with them. So I started with QMOS, and QMOS was only about $1 million in revenue. So you got to get the picture here. I went from a company that was $12 billion in revenue to one that was $1 million in revenue. This was a little tricky, but here's what happened with these guys. So they wooed me to come to the company, and the guy asked me, I'm having dinner with him during my interview, and he said, he turns over a napkin and he says, write me a job offer. He said, any person that is worth this job would know what this job is worth, so write me a job offer. So I wrote a job offer, and I basically doubled my salary, and I asked for a car and all that. Well, they gave me a big Lexus, and I had this whole thing going. And while I was at QMOS, they were trying to break into the United States market. This company was based in Ireland, and most of their revenues were in Europe. And they asked me, because of the experience with both Documentum and Intergraph, they asked me to develop a marketing strategy for them. Well, long story short, they went from $1 million in revenue to $13 million in revenue in 3 years. We won the Frost & Sullivan Market Innovation of the Year award, and the company was then spun off, and it was sold to Bovia. I kind of got bored with that, and in 2004, I started Onshore Technology Group, And within Onshore Technology Group is onshore engineering and construction. So you might be asking, do you do any engineering today? Yes, I do. We do building information modeling, and we also do transportation design engineering for departments of Illinois Department of Transportation. So I still do that. So if you look at the career path that I've taken, my engineering degree, this was the aha that I got out of this whole career path. I had a varied career path. I stayed in engineering for the most part, and even at Documentum and at Intergraph particularly, this is where I did a lot of my engineering work. I stayed in engineering pretty much all the way through, even to this day. But what I was doing here is this was a lot of problem solving over the last 30 years that I did. The IT industry flourished, PC industry flourished, and I was a part of that whole growth that happened in the technology industry. That's how I pretty much got from that point to this. Now this is where I lived in the Chicago area. From 1958, when I was born, to 1972. This was my home. You might recognize this building. If you have not been in the ghetto in Chicago, this is the ghetto. This is a building that's called Stateway Gardens, and there was a series of these. These are housing projects in the 60s and 70s. These were notorious. It was probably Chicago's most dangerous area. That's where I lived. This is where I live now. And let me go back 1 second here. This is where I live now. Education is the great equalizer. So after leaving the University of Wisconsin, I still live in a high-rise. It's a little bit different high-rise building. This is Lake Point Tower. It's actually at the pinnacle of Lake Michigan, and it's in the heart of downtown. This is the Chicago downtown area, if you're not familiar with this area. But after leaving the University of Wisconsin, I had a great career and a great life. I had many challenges that faced me, things that I had to fight for, salaries that, were unequal until a certain part. Do you know that midway through my career, I made more than most men did in my profession. At the height of my career in corporate America, I was making about $350,000 a year. I was making more than most men. So for those who think that it can't be done, if I could do it, and remember, I was reading on a 3rd grade reading back in the day, and I had a 4th grade level math score, and this is where I live. I live actually on the top floor in the penthouse in Lake Point. So I'm not in the middle of the building, I'm at the top of the building. So, you notice I put the University of Wisconsin crest on there, because this institution really did prepare me for the world that I entered. When I left the University of Wisconsin, was I ready for the world that awaited me? Yes, I was. I was more ready than what I thought I would be ready. But I was really ready, and I would never be in a place like this had it not been for my experience here. This was the most consequential thing that I did in my life, besides marrying my husband. Sorry, dear. So, was it worth it? It is worth it. A lot of ladies who come out of engineering programs, and the ones who leave I refer to, they say, well, it's not worth it, it's hard, and it's this and that. This is 5 years out of your life, and it is absolutely worth it. I have had a career that many people would die for. I have been literally all over the world, from the United States to Europe to Asia. I have traveled extensively, and that was another thing that I didn't realize I would be doing. I thought I would be working someplace in Chicago. I literally have traveled all over the world. I was chief marketing officer for an Irish-based software company. If you had told me that in 1982, that would happen, I'd be going, please, that's never going to happen. But it happened. Learn how to sell yourself, ladies, to your employers. Today, it's not about what's on your resume, it's about what you have to offer. This is one of the things that I did throughout my career, is I offered myself and my services. I always told my employer what was in it for them. This is the reason why you want to hire Valerie. This is the reason why you want to hire me. Go into your next interview and talk about what's good for your employer. Sell yourself to them. Tell them what you can do. Always make yourself valuable. That's been a hallmark throughout my career. I have always inserted myself into things, even if it wasn't even my job. I have always studied things that people didn't tell me to study, but I was always inquisitive. That's the Wisconsin way. All of you are just like me, that you're always asking why. And that's what I did. Your engineering degree will take you places. Today at lunchtime, I was sharing the story of every time I go into a meeting or I go into a room and I talk to somebody. Here was my first job interview. I'm talking to the guy and he says, what school did you go to? And I said, University of Wisconsin. And he said, Madison? And I said, yeah. You know, University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was like, oh my God, we only recruit from these 5 schools. And he named MIT, and he named, Harvard, and he named all of the top schools. Madison was one of the top that he talked about. I did not know how prestigious this degree was when I left, seriously. I knew University of Wisconsin was all of that. I had no idea how prestigious it was. So 2 weeks ago, I'm on the phone and I'm talking to a guy from Australia. And we're talking about the new software application that I developed. And we're going on or whatever, and we started doing a little bit of small talk. And he said, where'd you go to school for your engineering degree? And I said, University of Wisconsin. And he said, Madison? And that is the response that I get constantly from people when I tell them that I went to the University of Wisconsin. Next word out of their mouth is Madison? This is a very, very prestigious institution, and one of the things that was the biggest surprise to me, and with delight, was how well accepted and how well regarded this institution is outside of these walls. I was very surprised about that. Here's another thing that you're going to have to be aware of. Technology is changing. When I was here, today I walked around the campus and I'm just amazed at how beautiful this campus is and how many resources that you have here. Take advantage of that. Technology is changing the way we work and the way engineers do their jobs. When I was here, we literally had slide rules in 1976. We did not have personal computers. We did not even have a mobile phone. Can you believe it? No mobile phone. How do we live? But that's true. There were none of these things existed. But technology is changing the way we're doing things. And remember when I was telling you the engineers in the engineering department at US Steel had a huge mainframe that did not have one user on it. I was literally the only person using that computer. Engineers need to understand advanced technology, and at this institution, this is one of the best places to get an education because you have the resources here. The ladies in the room, I want to tell you, you can have a life. I've been married for 33 years, 33 happy years. I have 2 children. I try to get my daughter to come here. She's a medical student at Loyola. And my son is in game development. He has his own company now called Level 7 Studios. And he went to DePaul in Chicago. So I tried to get them to come to Wisconsin, but they're both in STEM. Okay? So at least I did that part right. But you can have a life. So in addition to my career, I have a well-rounded life. I had a really, really good life. 2 beautiful children, and I now have 3 grandchildren, little Noah, Athena, and Matthew. my 3 grandkids. So I've had a very, very, very full life. But you can have a life in engineering. Sometimes women think that I have to choose between a career and I have to choose between having a good life. No, you can have them both. And I've had a good life. And embrace lifelong learning. I am absolutely still learning. And I take the opportunity to read everything that I can get my hand on. I'm reading a book now about Nike called Shoe Dog. If you ever read it, it's the best story. It's the story about how Phil Knight, started Nike and his journey. I love reading about other people's journeys because when you look at successful people, you wonder how they got there. How did this happen for them? And strangely enough, these stories are strange. My story is kind of weird, in a strange way. I ended up loving school and getting a master's degree, somebody who didn't even want to go past 8th grade. Go figure. But I'm still learning, and I'm still embracing the learning. Your country needs you right now. Every single one of you is absolutely needed right now. We need engineers now more than ever. When I graduated, there was an engineering shortage. Right now, we have a shortage of engineers. We have a shortage of creativity, a shortage of minds. But there are no shortage of people like you who want to do this. For the ladies in the room, stick with it. It is absolutely worth it to stay in engineering. So here's a couple of keys to success. You're entering a global economy. Your chances of working abroad are pretty good. If I were to recommend anything to you, learn a language. I'm trying to learn French right now. Good luck with that. But I am trying to learn, French. I'm constantly trying to better myself. I knew Spanish because I took 3 years of Spanish in high school. But I'm trying to learn a different language right now. This is a global economy, and the more globalized we get, the more we're going to have to learn how to communicate with each other. So learn a language. And here's a couple of points. First of all, graduate from here. That's the first thing that I would recommend that you do. Get your degree from here. And everything that I've told you about how prestigious this degree is, how great this degree is, I have been so pleasantly surprised about how good this degree is. Understand your worth. You need to understand how much you're worth and how much other people value your worth. Understand you can't even begin to ask for salaries unless you know that. Volunteer for assignments. Don't wait for people to hand you anything. Go take it. There's an old scripture in the Bible that says, the kingdom of God suffers violence, but the violent take it by force. Sometimes you have to take what's yours. Don't wait for people to give you assignments. Take them. Be like the hidden figures. And here's the thing. Don't be a hidden figure. Why were these people hidden to begin with? Well, there's 1,000 reasons why they were hidden. But don't be a hidden figure. Let your light shine. Get out there and do the things that you're good at doing. And then think like a woman. That's the thing that we need. We need men and women to come together. And for the men in this room, this is not meant to be a slide on you because men have done fantastic things in this world. It's about men and women coming together and not big I and little you, but let's work together to get things done. Don't be a man in heels. Ginger Rogers said, I'm doing everything that Fred Astaire is doing, except I'm doing it backwards and in heels. A lot of times, that's what we're doing as women in engineering. We're doing the same thing that guys do, except we're doing it backwards sometimes and in heels. And then, dare to be different. This is a profession that not a lot of women go through this gate. But a lot of women need to go through this gate. When I look at successful women, and I look at women who have made a difference, the ladies at Toyota, different women, coming up with cures for cancer and things like that. They're fantastic women all over the world doing things. We can do it. There's no lock on creativity. There's no lock on intellect. All of us have the potential to do that, but dare to be different. And I say, dare to be an engineer. I love being an engineer. I still am one, I'm still practicing, and I'm still smiling. It's a good profession, it's a noble profession, and it's one that we do need more women in. Stick with it. So with that, join me on LinkedIn. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to catch me at the break. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.